Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I might have your attention, please. First of all, I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to every one of you. Not just to this evening, but to the Goa Art and Literary Festival 2013. And having said that, this evening is an extremely special evening because we firmly believe that in this, our fourth year, we thought we'd open up the festival not just to literary arts, but also to areas of food or culinary art. And this evening is exactly that. This evening is a celebration of all food Goan, if I might. And why not? This wonderful state of Goa offers more than one can handle and then some. And I mean that in the happiest way. So this evening is really special for us at the Goa Art and Literary Festival. Before we kick off the evening, one would like to really place on record very, very sincere appreciation, first of all, to this wonderful hotel, Siddhartha Goa, for opening its premises up to us and hosting us, hosting this really wonderful evening. And I request you to give them a round of applause, really, honestly. I think they truly deserve this round of applause and appreciation for being wonderful hosts, really wonderful hosts. Thank you very, very much. We'd also like to thank all our sponsors, and in particular Venita Cucini, who are sponsoring this evening, and they've been magnanimous. Obviously, the International Centre Goa for the effort that they put into the entire festival and indeed this evening. Having said that, what do we have in store for us this evening? Well, to start off with, we have a wonderful audience, some great interaction, great stories exchanged, both literary and around food. But in addition to that, we have the launch of two very special books. We'll get into that a little bit more, but A Married Man's Guide to Creative Cooking, the first one, and The Culinary Heritage of Goa, the second one. Yeah, woohoo, you're allowed to misbehave this evening, yeah? If that is misbehavior. Hey, you know what? Really, I mean that. I mean, this evening is an evening of celebration, so you're allowed to clap your hands, stamp your feet, do your thing. Just don't impede on your neighbor's thing, that's all we ask. So you're allowed to clap and, kind of have fun. That's what this evening's about. It's a celebration, like I said, of all things Goan, especially food. Okay, so besides the launch of the two books, we have some wonderful food being cooked up on the sides here by some senior, should I say, culinary experts from Goa. And we have a professional who will take us through that, beyond which we have 5 of Goa's most celebrated chefs, or among Goa's most celebrated chefs, who as we speak are cooking up a storm on the back lawn. And we will get to know more about what they're cooking up and, get to savor it if we're lucky. This evening is about food, like I said, celebrating food. And we thought, as a festival, why not celebrate someone who's intrinsically Goan and who has actually taken this art to the rest of the world. You must be aware, and if you aren't, allow me to inform you that as an extremely special and honored guest, not just this evening festival, we have with us Floyd Cardoz. And yes, let's welcome him with a warm round of applause. Why not? And we're going to interact with Floyd, but before we bring Floyd up, I thought a proper introduction is in order. So Floyd is the executive chef, partner of North End Grill of Danny Mayer's Union Square Hospitality Group. Before embarking on this new restaurant, Floyd was the executive chef of Tabla. I'm sure all those of you who travel to America have heard of it. Tabla, where Floyd was the executive chef, like I said, and that received numerous accolades, including a 3-star review from the New Yorker, and was nominated 4 times by the James Beard House for the best chef in New York. Floyd received the Humanitarian of the Year award from Share Our Strength in 2007. In 2011, Floyd received the title of Top Chef on Bravo's Top Chef Masters series. We had the privilege of seeing that on one of our local channels in this country, and I believe there was a repeat telecast recently, winning the grand prize, I might inform you, of $100,000. for his charity, or a charity of his choice, which was the Young Scientist Cancer Research Fund at New York's Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And this, I promise you, is just a snapshot. There's much, much more to Floyd. And one of those much, much more to Floyd things is the size of the man's heart. He truly is a wonderful person, which is most important. Joined us, on just a call, I believe, from Vivek. And he's here with us. Honestly, reason to celebrate. So Floyd's going to join us on stage for the launch of both the books. And speaking of the books, I must introduce first author, or the author of the first book that will be launched. The author is someone very familiar to us, Samar Harlankar, who is a part-time writer and cook and a full-time father. Yes, a round of applause is indeed in order. And feel free to applaud any which time you feel motivated to. A journalist for 23 years, a former managing editor of Hindustan Times. He continues to be a columnist for that paper and Mint, where he also writes on science and technology and cooking. He has written 2 books, A Married Man's Guide to Creative Cooking, which we will launch just about now, and the other Dubious Adventures, and Under the Rain Tree, I beg your pardon, a chronicle of India's internet revolution, where he has been a fellow at the American Society for Microbiology and the Energy and Resources Institute, New Delhi. So we're truly honored to have him here with us. I'm going to invite both Samar and Floyd to join us on stage. And let's give them a go and welcome as they come up onto stage. Can we have you both on stage? I'm going to request Floyd to formally, should I say, release or launch the book.
I am very, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I live in New York and I've been a long time going ever since I was born, but lived in Bombay, and to be here and to be among all these great people, talking about things going, for me, means a lot. I've always been a strong proponent of things going, even though I don't come here that often, but I am so excited to be releasing your book today, because it's, even in the title, it's so, A Married Man's Guide to Creative Cooking. I think the best way to a man's heart is to his stomach, and I think a way to a woman's heart is to her stomach. And if you cook for your kids and you cook at home, you will have a happy marriage. So this book is, I'm sure she knows it, trust me. So tell me, what made you do this book?
Actually, this is a chronicle of all the cooking I've been doing over the years. I used to write a blog and a column on cooking, and a couple of publishers said, why don't you convert this into a book, which is what I did. And I have to say that is my cooking roots were intrinsically Goan, because like you, I'm an expat Goan, and though I haven't actually lived here, the food that I began with, which was my version of my grandmother's Goan fish curry, was completely Goan. And
I just have to interrupt you for one quick minute. I'm sorry for doing this. You're a man, and in a normal world, men don't cook. What made you want to cook?
Because I like to eat, and I realized that if I wanted to eat well instead of oily rubbish on the streets, I needed to cook. So when I was a journalist who earned very little money, and my salary would be 20th of the month, so I used to cook. I learned to cook on a hot plate on the ground, and that's how I learned to cook.
So what's the exciting part of this whole process of this book is who do you want to read this book, and what do you hope to achieve with this book? Because we were actually speaking earlier, and I've been going through this. It's really, really interesting, and you mentioned something to me about sons, and I want you to tell that story because I have 2 boys at home, and for me it's very important that I convey to them my Goan roots, because we live in the United States and it's pretty far from here, and trying to get them interested in food and cooking. So please share that story, because I think that's very, very interesting.
Well, the book is actually incidental to my message, which is that you must get your sons into the kitchen. Because I feel one of the biggest problems in India is that Indian women cannot, in large measure, live out their ambitions because the man does not take over at home. So cooking is one part of it, but I think it's an important part of it. And I understand that things have been very different for many years, but if you get your sons into the kitchen, my mother got us into the kitchen early in the sense that me and my brother were made to chop, dust, things like that. And she did not want us to grow up to be this, you know what in North India is called this Mera Raja Beta. She didn't want any of those around. So she was a working woman in the early 1960s, and she didn't want any special treatment for a boy, so she made sure that we knew how to cook and dust. And that's my message, that if you actually start cooking, then perhaps at some time, we may stop having these ridiculous ads where the woman walks in from work and comes in and starts a washing machine and starts cooking and has the perfect meal ready for her perfect family.
You know, we were also talking earlier about ingredients and what ingredients you'd import or export. And you mentioned something that you always walk away with and carry with. And I think that's very, very interesting because not very many people outside of the west coast of India know about it. And you can forget about it in the United States because I kind of introduced it to the United States when I started cooking. But I think you should share what your favorite ingredient is, which is kind of nice.
So let me just tell you about my cooking philosophy. Wherever I've lived, whether in India or outside, my cooking philosophy has been that you use ingredients from a 1 square kilometer radius. One reason for that is I'm very lazy and I hate traffic. But the other reason I found is that if you truly want, we travel a lot. This is my present house is my 29th home in my life. So I've always cooked using whatever's around. But the one thing that I carry with me everywhere is kokum, which I have to explain that to audiences in other cities. I'm sure I don't have to do that here. So kokum is something I absolutely cannot do without because my fish curries cannot do without kokum at all. And of course I was very pleased to find out that apart from the other things that he carries along with him, kokum is also one of the things that Floyd sources from Goa and then deep freezes them in his refrigerator in New York.
Yeah, actually, one of the ingredients I was allowed to bring on Top Chef Masters was kokum because they didn't know what it was and they couldn't get it for me. But I actually get my kokum from Goa from an aunt of mine in Mapsa who harvests her own. So it's a very special ingredient, you know. So it's good to have.
It is absolutely. It's great with fish, kokma chesar, and I have started using it with my wife is vegetarian, so I started using it in vegetarian curries as well. And I think it's very versatile. I mean, you would know better than me how you can use kokum apart from the normal ways that Goans do.
You know, I use kokum in any recipe that calls for an acid. So if it calls for, say, yogurt or tamarind or mango or vinegar or a sour wine, I'll try and substitute out kokum or one of the other acids there is. I kind of think outside the box when I cook because I believe it's you got to be in a place to cook it. So I think you can change it out. You can use it with vegetables. You can use it with meat. You can use it with fish. You can pretty much use it for anything. I actually made a fish once where I pureed the kokum with a little bit of coconut milk, and I made a sauce with fish stock, and I used it on a fish. So you know, it's just up to your creativity and what you feel like doing at that moment in time. But I have to ask you another question about your book. If there was one thing that I had to cook from this book, which one should it be?
Well, one thing would be, I think, definitely the roast pork chops, because I love grinding spices, roasting them fresh. Yes. So they're freshly ground spices, and then marinated in Old Monk, which I drink a lot of. So, and then they're just grilled or pan fried.
So is there enough of Old Monk for the dish?
There's quite a bit of Old Monk in this book because I tend to cook with whatever I'm drinking at that moment.
I love your stories too that you have in there from different things that you put in, and it's very, very interesting to see a book done this way. And
can I tell my kokum story from Copenhagen?
Oh, I think that's a great story to tell. Please do.
So, you know, I was sent a few years ago, by 2009, I think, to the climate change negotiations in Copenhagen. I was covering it for my newspaper. And I had to rent a flat, an apartment for a week to 10 days. So I found this really nice apartment and I said I want to stay there. And the young man who owned the apartment, it was just too expensive for me. I said, is there any way that you can reduce this? He said, well, that's difficult. I said, look, what about, I said, no harm in trying. I said, can I cook a meal for you? He said, what kind of meal? I said, look, this is my blog. You can pick something. So he picked my version of my grandmother's Goan fish curry. And he said, if you cook this fish curry, I will give you €1,000 discount. And he did. And I had carried Kokum all the way to Copenhagen. And it got me that discount. Yes.
Like you said, it's also called Old Monk Pork Chops.
It is called Old Monk Pork Chops, yes. But I have to, I was talking to Freud earlier, and it's remarkable how the Goan, despite the fact that he's been away, I think, even further and even further away than I have been from Goa, those influences continue. He was just telling me about this lovely story about how during a New York, which he will tell you now, New York Food Festival, he set up a food cart outside on the street selling chorizo pao. And there were lines of people there, and finally at the end, when it ended, they said, where did he go, the man with the chorizo pao? You must tell us that story.
Yeah, so I've always been a huge fan of Goa sausages. As a matter of fact, when I want to bribe my kids, I make my stash. I always bring a stash from India back to the United States. So I wanted to introduce, being a lover of Goan food, I wanted to introduce our cuisine, to the West. And one of the hard things is that, people don't know much about Goan food. They know something called Vindaloo, which is nothing like what we eat here. So I decided that I was going to make choris, and I bought the pork, and I couldn't find the chilies, and I couldn't find the vinegar. So I used 5 different kinds of Mexican chilies, a mix, to get this maize. And I salted the pork, I marinated the pork, I stuffed the guts, I dried them, I smoked them in coconut shells, I did everything. And I opened this food cart, this was before the big food cart craze in the United States, outside my restaurant at a big barbecue festival. And I think I made 300 of them, and I stuffed it in the bread. And what I did slightly different was I baked the chorizo in the bread rather than kind of stuffing it, so it was kind of easy. So we sold those out very quickly, and the next year the same festival came again, and the first 50 guys who came were all looking for this dish, which we didn't have, because I decided the next year that I wasn't going to make it because it was so much work. So I think, if we introduce our food and our cuisine to people all over, it's an important story to tell.
Absolutely. And I asked him, he spoke about smoking it in coconut shells. Of course, I asked him, where did you get coconuts from? So he said, of course, those coconuts come from the Caribbean, which are, as he said, not as sweet as the coconuts we get here. But the bit about tradition is very interesting, because it never really leaves you. Even though we come from a Goan Hindu family, something has obviously carried over, because my father's philosophy is, if it has lived, we'll eat it. So we eat all kinds of things. And a lot of my friends have always been struck by how my father and mother are now crossed 80 and still continue eating whatever there is, and if preferably they'd rather not eat vegetarian at all. And I think then I found out in the course of this book, in fact, researching finding out where we came from, then I found out that we are what are called, we are Marathas, but we are what are called armory Marathas, meaning from the armor, the navy. When Shivaji's navy was, when Shivaji was finally, the Maratha Empire was dwindling, and the navy was turned to piracy, essentially. So essentially we were pirates roaming the Konkan coast, and finally we were forcibly resettled in villages along Goa and Maharashtra. And then I found in a 1906 ethnographical survey which said that this community will eat bears, lizard, and wild fowl and everything else. So I said that kind of explains some of our heritage and how it comes and stays there.
You know, I think eating all kinds of product, no matter what it is, from the area. And I think your 1 kilometer rule is amazing because people forget that. I was in the Mapsa market today, and I was intrigued by all these vegetables, and I saw the meat hanging in there, and the spices, and the lady selling the sausages and the dried fish, and we tend to forget that that's what our cuisine was, and going back to that and utilizing everything, wasting nothing. I still remember my great grandmother telling me is that I'll show you how to eat a fish head. Most people don't know how to do that. The pots. I've taught my son that, and whenever I cook a whole fish, my son wants the cheeks. Because that's, I think, is the best part of the fish. But learning to eat every single thing is my philosophy on how learning to cook everything is going to make you a great cook and make you, I'd say, a real gourmand. Anyway, it's been really a pleasure talking to you. I'm so excited for this, and thank you.
Thank you.
And if you don't have it, go out and get it.
Thank you very much.